I had an abortion. I was almost 12 weeks pregnant with my second child, and the doctor couldn't find the heartbeat. Instead of joyfully sharing the news with our family and friends, I spent Mother's Day crying and in pain as I waited for the medication to do its job. I had an abortion. At my 20-week scan, we learned that the fetus had a condition that would not allow it to be carried to term. The doctor assured me that there was no way that the fetus would survive birth, and continuing the pregnancy would likely present a risk to my health and my future ability to have children. Because of laws in my state, I had to travel for the procedure, which was expensive, time-consuming, and traumatic. I had an abortion. It was the wrong time and the wrong partner, and I did not want to be a mom. I don't regret it for a moment. That abortion enabled my future. I had an abortion. Actually, I had 7. We had been trying for years to get pregnant, and each time I learned that the procedures hadn't worked or the pregnancy didn't stick, and I had to have an abortion before we could start again. Even as I look at my children now, I feel the pain of the ones I never met. These stories are all real, and although they aren't all mine, they could be. Mine is the first one. Why am I telling you this? First, as Rabbi Salt said, it is Repro Shabbat, the annual Shabbat honoring reproductive justice and freedom. The foundation for the Jewish support of abortion is found in this week's Torah portion, in Exodus 21, verse 22. The text says, "When 2 people fight, and one of them pushes a pregnant woman and a miscarriage results, but no other damage ensues, the one responsible shall pay a fine to the woman's husband, and he shall pay it as the judge determines." We'll return to the other parts of this verse later, but for this moment, the most important part is that the one responsible should pay a fine. It's a fine. The punishment for causing the miscarriage is a fine. As we learn in other places in this parsha, the punishment for taking a life is the death penalty. The punishment for causing the loss of a fetus is monetary, and therefore we can deduce that the fetus is not the same as a life. Our tradition builds on this over time, throughout our rabbinic codes and into modern times. A fetus is not a life, and the life and the health of the mother, including her mental health, must always be prioritized. Abortion is allowed and sometimes required by our tradition. I'm not going to spend time tonight walking you through the sources that show that Judaism allows abortion, which I and others have done in many other places. Instead, I want to talk about how we speak about the Jewish value of bodily autonomy and what it means to be a community that values the voices and stories of those who have not just experienced only abortion, but also miscarriage, infertility, and other forms of reproductive care. In the Torah verse, the court never looks to the experience of the woman who has the miscarriage when imposing the fine. In fact, the fine is determined by her husband and the judges according to how much they determine the pregnant woman to be worth. Leaving aside this incredibly sexist and problematic parts of this verse, the person who is most harmed in this interaction, the woman, is not consulted or compensated. Instead, her experience is erased. I suspect that if I asked in this room if you have had an abortion, many hands would be raised. But you might not do it in this public forum because it isn't always something that we discuss, even with our closest families and friends. We don't talk about the abortions that enabled us to finish school or the ones following a sexual assault. We don't talk about the ones that came in the course of trying month after month to get pregnant, or the ones that happened because we were not in a place to raise yet another child. Abortion, infertility, IVF, and other issues of reproductive justice abortion, infertility, IVF, and other issues of reproductive justice are subjects that can make us feel so alone and isolated, as though we are the only ones going through this experience. What would it be like if we spoke about these experiences aloud and in the open? Many of our biblical women suffer through infertility and other pregnancy challenges. After 20 years of trying to become pregnant, Rebecca conceives twins, only to be miserable during her pregnancy as the two brothers fight in her womb. In her prize-winning essay on the Torah of pregnancy, Rabbanit Leah Sarna writes, "There are no stories of pregnancy until Rivka's. She came into a world where pregnancy is just a historical footnote, often omitted and never described. When her pregnancy is crushing, she doesn't even have the words for it beyond, 'Why am I?' So the Midrash tells, she went around to the other women, asking them their stories. Having broken the silence, she learns she is not the only person ever to struggle with this. Perhaps she finds out that her pregnancy is worse than most, but perhaps she finds out that pregnancy is often just this hard." Rebecca gains strength and purpose from hearing stories of these other women. The experience of sharing accounts of painful pregnancies opens up a new way of looking at the world, and the Midrash says that this is what motivated her to go to God and ask for some relief. What if instead of waiting for someone to come to us, we could open up the space for others on their reproductive journeys? My teacher, Rabbi Sharon Brous, shares a text that has animated her rabbinate. She writes about the ritual when the Jewish people would go up to the temple on the festival days. They would enter the temple, and the whole community would begin walking in a circle to the left, a holy hakafah, if you will. However, if you were in pain, if you were a mourner, if you were in some way brokenhearted, you would circle around to the right. And whenever someone coming from the left would meet you, they would look you in the eye and ask, "Malach, what happened to you?" The person would respond, "I am a mourner," or "I am ill," or "My heart is broken." And the other person would offer a blessing for comfort and healing. What a gift it must have been for those who were hurting to know that those in their community would be looking out for them and wanting to hear their stories. And what a gift to those who walked to the left to know that they would get to take away a drop of someone else's pain. Because the silence around infertility, IVF, and abortion contributes to our pain, even if we don't regret our choices, even if they were right and necessary ones. In their resources for Repro Shabbat, the National Council of Jewish Women shared a prayer that reads, in part, "May we find ourselves the collective will to create a just society in which reproductive justice, the holy right to own the personhood of one's own body, to have or not have children, to raise any children in safety and in community, is foundational. We cannot do this if we will not talk about it. So when someone asks you, 'Malach, what happened to you?' could you find the words to tell them? As I stand here tonight, I am asking, what happened to you? And I invite you to answer. Shabbat Shalom."